Recently, Ukrainian publications have been circulating a document called the 100-Day Trump Plan to End the War. This plan allegedly originated from American diplomats and made its way through European channels, ultimately reaching Ukraine. However, it's crucial to note that the authenticity of this document remains unconfirmed. That said, the details closely align with statements already made by Donald Trump and his former special envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. Here's a breakdown of what the plan reportedly includes. In late January or early February 2025, Donald Trump is said to have had a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin to discuss the peace plan, which would also be shared with Ukrainian officials. The plan suggests canceling Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's decree that prohibits negotiations with Putin. A key event in the plan is a high-level meeting involving Trump, Putin, and Zelensky, potentially set for late February or early March 2025. The goal? To finalize the main terms of the peace agreement. Ceasefire and troop withdrawal. The proposal includes a ceasefire across the entire front line, set to begin on Easter, April 20th, 2025. Ukraine would then withdraw its forces from the Kursk region. An international peace conference would be convened at the end of April 2025. This conference would aim to formalize the peace agreement with mediation from the United States, China, Europe, and the Global South. A swap of prisoners of war would be carried out, with the formula all for all. End of the war by May 9, 2025. By May 9, 2025, the plan aims for an official declaration marking the end of the war. This would also include lifting martial law and ending Ukraine's mobilization efforts. The plan calls for presidential and parliamentary elections in Ukraine, scheduled for late August and October 2025, respectively. Key points of the proposed peace agreement. Neutrality for Ukraine. Ukraine would not join NATO and would declare itself neutral. EU membership by 2030. Ukraine would aim to join the European Union by 2030. Europe would shoulder much of the responsibility for post-war reconstruction. Modernizing Ukraine's military. Ukraine's army wouldn't shrink, and the U.S. would continue the post-war modernization of its armed forces. Russia's sovereignty over occupied territories. While Russia's sovereignty over occupied areas won't be formally recognized, Ukraine would forego any attempts to reclaim them. Sanctions relief. Some sanctions on Russia would be lifted immediately upon the peace agreement's signing, with others phased out over 3 years, depending on Russia's adherence to the agreement's terms. Russian energy exports to Europe would resume, but with a special duty. This revenue would be used for Ukraine's reconstruction. Inclusive elections. The autumn elections would allow parties that support the Russian language and peaceful coexistence with Russia to participate. The persecution of the Russian language and church would cease. The introduction of a European peacekeeping force into Ukraine after the conflict's resolution would be subject to agreement by all parties involved. It's important to emphasize that this entire peace plan hinges on successful communication between Moscow and Washington. If the two powers fail to find common ground, the entire initiative would be put on hold. This 100-day Trump plan offers a potential blueprint for peace, but as of now, it remains speculative. If it were to move forward, its implementation would depend on significant diplomatic coordination. Don't forget to subscribe as we follow updates on this story unfolding.